Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have guest Don McLaughlin. Don is a recovering lawyer, father of three, ultra-endurance athlete, founder and CEO of PurePower Botanicals, and the author of Plants, Performance, and the Endocannabinoid System. Before founding PurePower, Don served as a government prosecutor, trial lawyer, and tech entrepreneur in the Fortune 500 for nearly 20 years. While he enjoyed great success in his career, he also experienced intense struggles with anxiety and depression while working under extreme pressure and stress. Don is a wellness advocate and health investor who discovered a natural and holistic way to overcome burnout, chronic anxiety, and depression by incorporating hemp extract and other herbs in a series of daily ancient practices. His mission is to share what he discovered during his recovery in order to help others battling similar challenges. Welcome, Don. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Tanya. Thanks so much for the invite. Looking forward to our conversation.
Definitely. And so as I'm reading your bio, I am resonating with it very deeply because myself too, I worked in the healthcare field for nearly 20 years in a very high stress, high trauma environment. And I found my way to hemp and CBD and other remedies to help alleviate my nervous system because I was in such a state of fight, flight, or freeze that I was just looking for anything that would help calm me. I was having a difficult time sleeping. My body was in a constant state of tension and stress. And so let's talk a little bit more about your story and how, where you were and then how you were guided to learn more about hemp.
Yes, I'd love to. Definitely parallels, although in different realms. Mine, obviously, in the legal field. I got to the point that, I knew I needed help. And this is, a few years, honestly, into my legal career. I'm definitely a driven person, and I found myself in increasingly more stressful situations because of the nature of the work. So high-profile criminal investigations and lawsuits, and in the midst of that work, the stress just accumulated, not just over weeks, but over months and then years, and ultimately led me down the traditional path, which is seeing a psychiatrist and being diagnosed clinically depressed and prescribed antidepressants. And this was at a period of time in which I had left my role as an in-house lawyer at a big corporation, and I had founded a technology and consulting firm that was serving some of these big corporations in highly sensitive areas, which was, electronic data related to investigations and lawsuits.
Wow.
And while the opportunity was immense, it carried with it even more stress than I'd been experiencing as an in-house corporate lawyer, because all of a sudden you're starting to build something that you're responsible in many respects for the livelihood of the team that I'd started to build. And that pressure mounted, and then we had the 2008 financial crisis, in the aftermath of which there was real changes in the way our business was running and the clients, and in particular, reductions in the amount of spend and how it was impacting a business that I just founded a year earlier in 2007. And so 2009 and 2010 were very hard years for me for that reason. And yet, the traditional route of seeing a psychiatrist, getting prescribed Zoloft, while in the short term it definitely helped, and I don't want to undercut or undermine the value that prescription drugs can have from that perspective. It proved to be something that I think was intended as a short term. It proved into a long term thing that I just felt like I couldn't get off of. In fact, I tried to get off of Zoloft a couple of times and found it very difficult to do so. And ultimately, that led to, for me, Tanya, a rock bottom moment in November of 2012 that I found myself, or I put myself on the floor of a luxurious hotel bathroom and came to around 5 a.m. In a bit of a mess. Just from a drinking binge, which some would discount as, oh well, it was the night after my youngest brother's rehearsal dinner, and so a celebratory moment. But I woke up that morning at 42 years old and thought, how is it that I find myself here as outwardly a very successful lawyer and founder and CEO? That I knew something was seriously amiss, even with the things that I'd done to try to help manage the stress. Clearly, some major changes needed to happen, because at that moment I felt like so much in my life was at risk and in jeopardy, and it was because I was at risk. And that really started with me looking at how I was managing things in my lifestyle, and both as a leader in my family first and foremost, and in the business. And that led me to turn over every single stone that I could to try to better manage stress, and do so in a more holistic way that wasn't so reliant on this prescription drug. And that led me to read anything and everything, listen to podcasts. So this is late 2012 into early 2013. And there was one moment in particular. I was reading an article in the Denver Post that drew my attention. It talked about this thing called hemp and its reported therapeutic properties and benefits around stress and anxiety. And that immediately, I dove into the article, and then I almost fell off my chair, because when the article talked about hemp as something that had been around for eons, and that there were reports of very positive benefits from a health perspective, what shocked me so much is that I started my legal career as a prosecutor prosecuting cannabis crimes, and I had no idea that there was something called hemp. And this article said that it was non-psychoactive and that it was legal. And I thought, who didn't tell me about this when I'd spent years, prosecuting those crimes? And so that led me on a journey. So this is, early 2013. At that point, there really wasn't still much known publicly about the benefits of hemp. Still very much, I think, it was, associated with marijuana, right? And in that way, there was still a stigma associated with it. So I was left to just, sort of self-experiment, and that's exactly what I did in an arena that I was not that comfortable with, right? I mean, as a lawyer and a prosecutor, the world of marijuana was one that I stayed well away from growing up, and yet, as I started to try hemp extract, commonly referred to as CBD, I started to notice I slept a little bit better. My stress seemed to be a little bit more manageable. Didn't struggle as much with anxiety, and also I noticed that I had more energy, and it was great. And so around this same time, Tanya, what also was happening, I said I kind of turned over every stone. So I reincorporated a mindfulness practice of just sitting in the morning and collecting my breath and just trying that out. And then I recommitted to exercise in a much more meaningful way, several times a week, ensuring that I got 45 minutes roughly of exercise. And those things, I think, all started to contribute to an overall, improvement in my mental and physical well-being, and others started to notice it. And around this same time, I also, for unknown reasons, I read an article about trail running and ultra endurance trail running in particular that really captured my interest. And so, I started to have this positive virtual cycle of feeling better, having more energy, and it started to pay off both in my business, and then in this newfound interest in ultra endurance trail running, because at the age of now 43, I jumped in the summer of 2014 into ultra endurance trail running, and a lot has happened since then. But that's kind of the backdrop and how I found my way to hemp, and then other herbs that I started to, in my research, ashwagandha to also help with stress reduction, turmeric with inflammation. And these things seem to contribute to my being able to now, go from somebody that was, kind of eating anything and everything, pretty low energy, to doing these long distance, 30 and then 50 mile and then 100-mile ultra endurance trail runs. I attribute to the combination of things, not just one thing, but hemp was the mainstay and in many ways the primary catalyst for everything after that.
That's an amazing story. And I can definitely resonate with a lot that you were saying, because, I too found hemp. I started to look into ways to eliminate dairy out of my diet. And that's how I was guided to hemp. I started buying hemp seeds and then making my own milk, hemp milk. And that's where it started. And then I got the oil and I started to incorporate that on my skin and on my hair. And then I would ingest it. And then it just went, one thing after the other. And like you, I also started to learn more about the adaptogens and the herbal remedies. And I was diving more into all of those. And I, like you, started to treat myself like a guinea pig a little bit. I was like, all right, I'm going to test this out. I'm going to try it and I'm going to see. Well, as time went on, it was very similar. My coworkers started to recognize the difference, with me. I wasn't as stressed. I was more relaxed. And so they started to come to me and ask me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm kind of just learning more about herbal remedies. I'm learning more about hemp. And, and they're like, okay, well, tell me more. So it started to lead more into, and when I moved out here to Idaho, I met a group of people and we actually started a little hemp farm. It was really funny. We didn't know what we were doing. And we started a little hemp farm with the, intention of pulling out the oils from it and utilizing that. So I started to dive more into learning about just the hemp plant itself and all of the kind of characteristics that can come from it. And you had mentioned, working as a lawyer, it was like taboo to go anywhere near marijuana, and me as well, working in healthcare, because we were getting tested regularly. And so, when I started to learn about CBD, and then I started to learn about CBN, CBG, all these other characteristics of the hemp plant that were not, necessarily going to be found in a drug test per se, like THC, I began to recognize that this is something I can take regularly to help assist with sleeping, regular sleep cycles, to assist with pain and inflammation that I had in my body, and also energy endurance, like you said. So let's talk a little bit about the plant itself, Don. And, because I think, there is that taboo when we talk about hemp, that there's that marijuana and, I can't take that. I'm going to be tested. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mentioned that day when I read the article in the Denver Post and how floored I was that this plant was non-psychoactive and that it was legal. And so I just, out of natural curiosity, I dug in to discover that hemp has been widely cultivated around the world as an industrial crop, and was in the United States, certainly around the time of the founding of the country, and then even up to World War II, that hemp was actively promoted by the federal government to help support the war effort in terms of the materials that can come from the hemp plant, things like rope, other
Rope.
textiles. And interestingly enough, the oil derived from hemp has been used as a fuel source, right, for even the combustion engine. And these things fascinated me, and I thought, well, geez, why is it that no one really knows about it? And then I think you can look at the history in the '60s when hemp was grouped in with marijuana. And just to give everybody just the 101, right? Cannabis is the sort of genus of the plant, much like tomatoes have a variety of different types of tomatoes, right? Cannabis has different varieties, and marijuana is one. That's the one most commonly associated, and that has THC, which is the chemical component, that the compound that creates the high, right? That comes from marijuana. Hemp, on the other hand, is again a derivative that has all the other properties that the things that I mentioned, right? Textiles, other things that can come from it. But from a health perspective, what really I think changed everything in terms of science and medicine's understanding of cannabis and its health properties is actually related to the discovery of what's now been referred to as the endocannabinoid system. And that was only discovered in the late 80s or early 90s, so a relatively recent discovery. And the discovery was one that pointed to how this endocannabinoid system has these series of receptors that are highly concentrated around major organs inside the body. So the brain, the central nervous system, the gut, and these endocannabinoid receptors, they act as essentially communication neurotransmitters in the brain, but then elsewhere in the body. And it just so happens that we can know from science now that the endocannabinoid system plays an instrumental, fundamental role in helping regulate core functions inside the body, and importantly, help create this state of balance, or homeostasis, as it's referred to in more of the science and medical literature. And so that all of a sudden was like, oh wow, okay, so the way it helps me better manage my stress and anxiety and sleep, clearly there was science behind it. So it just propelled me forward, and I wanted to know more. And so it led to me then doing research and collaborating with a co-author to write a book on this subject. Plants, Performance, and the Endocannabinoid System is what we titled it, 21st Century Sports Medicine. And the reason we chose that title is because I grew up as an athlete. I shared with you how athletics and trail running, long distance running in particular, it was really transformative for me. So I wanted to focus in the area that it started to really gain some traction, and that was in the world of athletics as an alternative to the prescription drugs that are often doled out related to sports injuries and the benefits that I was receiving as an athlete. But in the course of doing that research, I discovered that there is a fair amount of medical science studies that have been done, many of them at that time. So this is roughly 2016 when I was doing a lot of the research. 2017 was outside the US, I think. And so there was a lot there in the way of the science. And to be clear, again, this is very specific to hemp, right? Certainly there's scientific research around marijuana and its benefits and its drawbacks. But this is hemp. And for me, as you mentioned, I just all of a sudden found something that in day-to-day I could integrate as a way to, again, improve my health. And based on the research and the science I looked into, virtually no downsides, right? Non-habit forming in the way that marijuana THC can definitely be. And the primary difference there is that in those receptors that I talked about, THC binds to those receptors in ways that heroin, opiates, they also have that. They bind, in ways that if you do that too consistently, it becomes very habit forming, and it can be tough to break. And I think that, in the push for legalization of marijuana, that's one thing that I don't think is talked about enough, is that there is absolutely habit addictive forming dangers with marijuana and THC. Didn't find that and don't find that in the world of hemp and the cannabinoids that come from hemp oil. And the World Anti-Doping Agency years ago, 2018, they removed CBD and cannabinoids from hemp as a prohibited substance. And I think that's proof positive that, there's just not the same risks around hemp that there is with respect to marijuana in particular.
Absolutely. And gosh, had I known this back in college when I was playing sports, I went to a Division III college. I played basketball, and, I would suffer injuries, and my teammates were smoking marijuana, but they weren't performing as well, in practice and in the games. And so I really was never guided to heal in those ways. I mean, of course, they'd put me in the ice tank and Wim Hof it, and sit there and just really, kind of heal. But had I known more about CBD and hemp back then, I think that I would have been healing better. I would have been sleeping better, and I would have been performing better. So I love that you decided to write a book that tagged it into sports medicine and sports therapy, because these are things that, back in, when I was playing sports in high school and college, everybody's like, just smoke some weed, you'll feel better. But really, it was making me tired. It was making me groggy, and it wasn't for me. But when I found CBD, I'm like, and even the side of that of CBN for sleeping as well, I was like, wow, this is a whole new world, for me. And so, but I learned that in my 30s, it was a lot later in life. But what are some things that people should look out for or avoid when they are, researching or buying hemp products? Because I know that was a rabbit hole that I went down. There's a lot of pesticides that can be on these products and whatnot. So Don, what have you found in your research that you could share with the listeners about, where to even begin?
Yeah, it's definitely buyer beware in many respects, in part because, CBD obviously, certainly in the US, and I think now you see it globally, it draws a lot of attention, and when it starts showing up in major magazines and social media outlets, what happens, unfortunately, is, those that are looking to make a profit jump in, and that can lead to, the creation of products that perhaps there hasn't been a lot of due diligence, and it's fairly easy to make, right? In the sense that you can get, distilled powder that's from the hemp plant, but then it's just mixed with certain oils. And you're right, if it's not cultivated in the right way, it can definitely carry more pesticides. Why? Because the way the hemp plant grows, it tends to pull things up from the soil. So the growing conditions become much more important. And I think, Tanya, very specifically, that doing due diligence in terms of where they're buying the product from. Is it a reputable company that demonstrates that it's done that due diligence, that it's careful about its sourcing? And what's the proof? The proof is the tests, right? Are there certificates of analysis that are available on the website that demonstrate, what the contents are based on the testing that is performed? That is numero uno, which makes it such that buying, CBD at the, gas station or convenience store, probably you want to be extra cautious, right? Yeah. Because that's probably high volume, industrial grade, and you just don't have the chance to look at those certificates of analysis that disclose tests that have been done on the hemp. So I think that's first and foremost. Tanya.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with you on that. And I, when I was going through that learning curve, it was like I was just diving into all these different brands and learning and getting on their website and seeing where their product is coming from. Where is the seed coming from? Is it GMO? Is it this? Is it that? It was like a rabbit hole in itself. So, as you were going through this process, you decided to found a a company called PurePower Botanicals. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mentioned that when I was really struggling, I was in the midst of growing this business that was focused in the corporate and legal space in particular. Ultimately, after that low moment in 2012, things really did turn around. And within a year, we had multiple parties interested in buying the business. And roughly a year later, did officially sell the business. And then I worked for the company that acquired us to integrate my business in a much larger business, which, that was a big surprise. Like, selling a business is a big milestone, but I probably had more stress after I sold the business because of everything that came along with it. And while that was happening, I was continuing to experiment with different combinations of adaptogens. And then I got into functional mushroom extracts that I think now I'm very glad to see there's more awareness about the benefits of some of these functional mushrooms like reishi and chaga and even cordyceps for energy that have been used for millennia, right, in Asia. Ayurveda is sort of the health side of yoga, and Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine have talked about things like functional mushroom extracts and these other adaptogens extensively. But I just, in my experimentation, my running started to just, as I said, I was not a natural born runner. I got kicked off my high school cross country team. I was such a bad, disinterested runner, which was a feat in and of itself because I've been on probably 20 sports teams in my life. And, cross country team, don't they need people on the cross country team? But I managed to get myself kicked off the team. But in my mid 40s, again, I started to run at the, 30-mile and 50-mile distance consistently at high altitude. And I was recovering pretty quickly. And then I went up to the 100-mile distance in 2016. And I think it was in part because I started to incorporate all of these other adaptogens with hemp. And I noticed that some of them, I just was having a bigger impact. And I thought that maybe the combination or the synergies between them was what was giving sort of that X factor, right? Compared to just taking turmeric by itself or something else by itself. And so when I was sort of phasing out of that last business, around the same time, I've got a cousin, Sean McCabe, who suffered a traumatic brain injury in late 2015, nearly ended his life. He was in ICU and then intense rehab. And he'd been a highly successful executive in the wind industry, got an MBA from Michigan, and yet he was rendered, couldn't do a push-up, couldn't ride a bike, couldn't drive. And so about 4 or 5 minutes into his recovery, I turned him on to what I'd been discovering. And that was a little bit foreign for him too, but he gave it a go. And after a relatively short time, I want to say within a couple months, he said, "What's going on with this stuff? I've been taking it and my anxiety is lower. I've got more energy. I'm sleeping more deeply," which for a traumatic brain injury, sleep is the #1 healing agent, right? So in the midst of seeing his experience, I thought, wow, there's something really here. And so I mentioned to him, listen, I don't see any other products out on the market. I couldn't buy anything. I had to combine these things, right? So that's
frustrating.
That planted the seed. And then, PurePower was really born from both our experiences from coming back from these really dark places. And, the idea that what we were experiencing was very pure, this is from Mother Nature. And it was having a very positive impact on both of us. And that's how PurePower was born. And we started by thinking, what did we struggle most with? And then we searched high and low for an herbalist to come up with some formulas. And then we, sampled them with friends and family over the course of about almost a year, that whole process. And so start to finish, it took us almost 2 years to launch the company, in part because there were no other products like that. We had a hard time finding a manufacturer that would even distill the oil into powder and combine it with these other adaptogens. And yet, as soon as we launched, we connected with some athletes, and me as a runner, I connected with some pro runners. And they started to notice some big gains, runners in their early 30s hitting new personal records. And one of those runners was interviewed by a journalist from Runner's World, and Runner's World was doing their first piece on CBD at the end of 2018. And the writer wanted to speak with us because he hadn't found any other company doing what we were doing, combining various adaptogens and botanicals with hemp. And that got us into Runner's World. And then it was republished in Bicycling. And that kind of one thing led to another. And so it was really through the world of athletics that, we sort of, launched on a shoestring in many respects. I mean, I think, most in the health supplement space would look at what we did and say, that's crazy. You can't raise a money, company on that little money, but the benefits were there. And so that's really how PurePower was born. And we were focused on the things that we struggled most with. And our friends and family told us that they struggled most with, which was persistent stress, low energy, recovery or pain and inflammation, and then sleep as a component of recovery. And so that's what PurePower is focused on 100%. And we want to enable people to, live a more active life for longer in their life and really enjoy their lives much more than perhaps what they're struggling with in terms of just fundamental health issues that are undermining their life, quality of life.
Absolutely. And wow, that's an amazing story. And, for me being a high school and college athlete, I didn't want those injuries that I suffered in my teens and 20s to affect me in my 30s and 40s and beyond. And so this is where your products can definitely come into play because, when I started taking these products, I began to recognize, I had sprained my ankles numerous times playing ball. And now it's like, I don't have the problems with my ankles or even my knees that I used to in my late 20s. And I really do feel it has a lot to do with the hemp and the herbal remedies and just really, and also incorporating certain electrolytes, into my body as well. And so, many of us that go down these rabbit holes of our own healing journeys find that we can't find products that will assist us. So I give you kudos for going out there, grabbing your machete almost and paving your own, your own path and creating that, because that is not an easy task to do, let alone creating a business behind it. And so, that is, but yet you're going to be helping so many people. And, and I put so much intention and value behind this podcast and sending this information out into the world. For those of you who have not, even heard of hemp or most people have heard of CBD, but they don't really even understand, number one, that it's legal, that it, it doesn't come up on tests, and it is associated with THC, but it's really not, and so I'm hoping that by us having this dialogue today, it will kind of plant the seed, so to speak, or open people's eyes to these natural remedies that the earth provides for us. And, maybe that will take people along their own healing journey through a deeper understanding of herbal remedies, adaptogens, and, cannabinoids, and all these other amazing things that are out there outside that kind of negative persona of smoking weed and pot.
Yeah, so that's right. I think that, I so appreciate this conversation because I think that unfortunately there's been a lot of misinformation, some of which has been intentional and some of which just happened, as a result of the commercial, all of a sudden the commercial attention around CBD, right? But there's lots of science behind this. It's not a snake oil. There is some evidence that for certain folks with certain DNA makeup, that cannabinoid therapy, as it's known, is not going to have the same positive effect. But I think that evidence is a very, very, very small percent of the population. I think for the lion's share of most folks, they're going to derive some benefits. And, I think science has even pointed to endocannabinoid deficiency, where those receptors that we talked about can basically go fallow and they're not as active because of persistent stress. Food can, poor diet can contribute to these receptors going fallow in ways that create massive imbalance and
lack of sleep,
lack of sleep, which sort of all contribute to a degradation of health. And I'll just focus on the gut because I think it's one that is easy to overlook, even though there's a lot of talk about probiotics and prebiotics. Clearly cannabinoids play a big role in balancing the gut and helping restore the gut. And why should we care about the gut? Were people talking about the gut 100 years ago? No. The change is that our farming has changed, right? And science has shown very clearly that chemicals sprayed on crops have an adverse impact on the gut and lead to conditions like leaky gut and many of the things that have become sort of modern ailments. And so cannabinoids, I believe, and I think the science is there, really can help restore and nourish the gut in ways that then help, combat all these other associated health conditions that are just part of, modern life, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And the gut plays such a role in everything, to our endocrine system, our circulatory system, and our nervous system, everything. It's like, we have our mind, our heart, and then our gut, and they're all very deeply connected. And so, Don, this was a really fascinating conversation. And so if people want to learn more about PurePower Botanicals or to even get a hold of your book, where do they need to go to connect with you?
Sure. Thanks, Tanya, so much. So Amazon is the best place for the book. Again, the title is Plants, Performance, and the Endocannabinoid System. That's the best place to find it there on Amazon. And, it's a very, very low price. And then for our PurePower products, the best place to go to is livepurepower.com, livepurepower.com. And happy to extend a discount for your listeners. PurePower 15 will apply 15% off their first purchase, again at livepurepower.com. And then the other way is just through social media. So you can go on and look at PurePower Life on Instagram and Facebook. And we'd like to put out a lot of content. You'll see that from our website. I think we've got over 120 blog posts that are there to be educational, really to counteract some of the misinformation, and also not make this all about, we say this at PurePower, this is not about popping pills, right? This is about how to integrate natural solutions into a lifestyle, right? And so a lot of our content is on other aspects of life that are very helpful, right? Like sleep routines and rituals, what forms of exercise, cold water exposure, the benefits of breath, to, again, take that holistic approach. This is not about products. This is about lifestyle.
Absolutely. And, Don, I really appreciate the energy and you being vulnerable today, sharing your story. It's not easy to, come forward and share that we've been through dark times, but I do feel, that oftentimes those dark times bring us to the light. And so I appreciate all the time that you spent with us today and to really tap into some of these misconceptions around hemp. And so thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. It's been a pleasure.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.